The story of a young waitress spread like wildfire, not because she made a mistake, but because she chose kindness over company rules. She was a simple girl, working long shifts at a local restaurant, often overlooked by customers who barely noticed her name tag. Like many waitresses, she lived off tips, smiled when she didn't feel like smiling, and served food while dreaming of a better tomorrow. But one ordinary day, something happened that changed her life forever. An elderly man entered the restaurant, walking slowly, leaning heavily on his cane. His clothes were worn out, his shoes scuffed, and his eyes carried the kind of heaviness that only life struggles could leave behind. Some customers turned their heads away, pretending not to notice him. Others shifted uncomfortably, as though his presence didn't quite fit into their perfect lunch hour. But the young waitress noticed. She saw him not as a burden, but as a human being who needed compassion. He asked for a simple meal, nothing fancy, just enough to fill his stomach. His voice trembled, his hand shook slightly, and she could sense he didn't have much money. Without hesitation, she walked over to her manager and quietly asked if she could cover his meal herself. But her manager's face hardened, reminding her of a strict policy: no free food under any circumstance. Company rules came before compassion, and employees were warned never to bend them. The waitress, however, couldn't ignore the old man. She brought him a warm plate of food anyway, slipping a quiet smile his way, and whispered that it was taken care of. The old man's eyes filled with tears. He thanked her with a shaky voice, calling her an angel. It was a small act of kindness, one she thought nobody noticed. But she was wrong. Within minutes, the manager stormed out from behind the counter, furious. Right there, in front of everyone, he fired her on the spot. Customers gasped. The old man tried to intervene, but his voice went unheard. The young waitress stood frozen, her apron still tied around her waist, shocked that a single act of kindness had cost her job. What happened next, however, stunned everyone. Because just a second later, almost like life itself was watching, something incredible happened that turned her world upside down. The old man she helped was not who everyone thought he was. And in that moment, the entire meaning of her action shifted from a punishment to the start of something extraordinary. The old man slowly stood up, leaning heavily on his cane, but his posture changed. His shaky hand steadied, his tired eyes sharpened, and his voice grew stronger. The customers who had looked away now stared in disbelief. The man who seemed fragile and poor wasn't just anyone. He was someone far more important than the restaurant staff realized. He placed his cane against the table, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a small card. With deliberate steps, he walked up to the furious manager, handed him the card, and said firmly, "I think you've made a mistake today. And not just with her." The manager glanced at the card, his face draining of color. Printed on it was the name of a well-known businessman, a philanthropist who owned several successful companies across the state. The very man standing in front of him wasn't a struggling beggar, but a wealthy figure who often tested people's humanity by appearing as someone in need. The old man then turned to the waitress, who still stood in shock, her eyes welling up. He smiled gently and said, "You didn't just give me food. You gave me dignity when others tried to take it away." Customers began whispering, some even clapping softly. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted completely. The manager tried to backtrack, stammering excuses, but the old man silenced him with a raised hand. "Kindness should never be punished," he declared. Right there, in front of everyone, he offered the waitress something she never imagined. He told her he was looking for people like her, those who had compassion, integrity, and the courage to do what was right even when it cost them. He handed her a second card, this one bearing the name of his foundation, and told her to report there the next day. She wouldn't just be a waitress anymore. She would have a position in his organization, one that valued humanity over profit. Tears streamed down her cheeks as the reality sank in. She had lost her job in the cruelest way, but within seconds, she gained an opportunity far greater than anything she had ever dreamed of. Customers who had witnessed the scene stood to their feet, applauding her bravery and kindness. Some even apologized for not stepping in themselves. The manager, red-faced and humiliated, tried to salvage his pride, but the damage was done. Word of the incident spread quickly, first among customers, then across social media, and within hours, the story went viral. People everywhere praised the young waitress for choosing humanity over rules and condemned the restaurant for punishing her compassion. The next day, when she arrived at the businessman's office, she was welcomed warmly. The staff there already knew her story. She was no longer just the shy waitress who served tables. She was now the woman who proved that empathy still mattered. Her role at the foundation allowed her to help countless others, families in need, struggling elderly, children who had been forgotten by society. Every day, she carried with her the lesson that a single act of kindness could change not just one life, but many. Looking back, she often thought about the moment she slipped that plate of food onto the table for the old man. At the time, she worried about breaking rules, about losing her job. But in truth, that moment was the beginning of a new chapter. The irony was powerful. She was fired for helping an old man, but in that same second, she stepped into a life she had always silently hoped for, a life filled with purpose, dignity, and respect. And the old man? He continued his quiet mission, appearing in unexpected places, testing the hearts of those who claimed to serve others. But he never forgot the young waitress who, without hesitation, chose kindness. Her story became a reminder everywhere it was told. Rules may keep order, but compassion is what keeps humanity alive. And sometimes, when the world seems harshest, it only takes one small act of courage to turn everything around.